the 24th, 2006, lightning struck the Ontario Government Building in Red Lake, Ontario.
The probability of getting hit by lightning is pretty slim, but we did.
Never thought the building would catch fire. Who'd think? A brick building, metal roof, what could possibly happen?
It's something you don't think is going to happen.
And then we started to see a little bit of smoke. I think it was a lot of shock and disbelief as to what we were actually seeing.
And then it's like awe, and all of these flames are coming out.
Did I think something like that could happen? I guess in the back of my mind it was always there.
The staff rallied, my management team really rallied, and we've recovered 100%.
I was working in my office. There was a storm passing through.
And this one cloud was coming in. And it was very black and ominous. And we looked at it, and then all of a sudden...
Wow, that almost gave me a heart attack.
The lights flickered, computers flickered. You know, nothing unusual for a thunderstorm coming through Red Lake.
Smelled a bit of smoke. Didn't think too much of it at the beginning because there's often a number of smells that get sucked in from outside.
And at that point, there was a little whiff of smoke coming out of the wall. So I called out to Miles Perchuk, who was walking in the hall to pull the fire alarm, which he did, and then Cindy Moncrief called 911.
Yeah, then we proceeded to evacuate the building.
And at that time, we had the fire wardens within the building go around to ensure that everybody did actually leave the building.
I went outside, met with one of the other fire wardens from the geology area. I reported that everything was fine.
And I can tell you, it's just an incredibly good feeling that the evacuation plan worked 100%, and that you were, certain that everybody was out of the building. So that was definitely one of the good things that happened.
Well, we didn't see a lot at the time. In fact, there wasn't much in the way of smoke at that time. It was raining, and we were kind of wondering when will we be going back in? I'm sure any minute now we'll be asked to go back in. And then we started to see a little bit of smoke.
A call comes in as I was going over Hospital Hill that there had been a lightning strike at the M&R building.
Pager went off. Our firefighters are here within 2-3 minutes. Immediately into the back of the pumper, donning BAs. The rest of the firefighters would be jumping into our command post.
From the time the call was put in, we were actually on site at 6 minutes with the pumper, the command post, and 8 firefighters, and more coming as we were going along.
It didn't take long for the fire department to get here.
It was maybe a standard go in and snuff out a little area or something like that. But we learned differently when we got there within a few short minutes.
I think it was just a lot of shock and disbelief. We just couldn't believe what we were seeing. And even though we saw smoke, we still thought that there was a chance maybe to go back in the building. This was just something very small, and it'd be over with before you know it.
Upon arrival, we noticed some fairly light smoke coming out of the uppermost level of the roof, and within a matter of minutes it was pouring out. Probably within 15 minutes, the whole attic roof area of the whole building was, I would say, fully involved.
So we brought in a loader to lift the roof and then shoot in some foam and water, and it did help a bit, but then there was so much fire spreading around the building itself, around the cement block, that we were really fighting the whole 4 sectors of the building.
The roof started collapsing and obviously making its own holes up in the uppermost part of the roof. We were able to apply a lot more water and be a lot more effective in suppression.
I had a call from our fire chief, Joe Blazik, and he told me that lightning had hit the M&R building, the Government Services building, and that it was a very bad fire. We went down and investigated it with the chief, and you could see that the building was getting engulfed in flames, so it looked like it was going to be a total loss, which it was.
It was actually pouring rain at the time, and I was in a CO vehicle that was used to block the street, and making those notifications and keeping people up to date what was going on site.
In previous years, we'd always talked that if something ever happened to their building downtown, that they would move to this building. So we had a preliminary plan in place. So I approached Graham and asked if we wanted to activate that plan. He kind of hesitated at first, turned around and looked at the building, turned around and looked back at me and said, yes.
We agreed to meet with our management team at 3 o'clock out at the fire management headquarters.
The one thing I noticed when I was talking to Graham and the rest of the staff was they had nothing with them. They had left the building and had taken absolutely nothing with them because I think they thought that this was just another fire drill or they were going to be out of the building for a few minutes and they'd be right back into it.
The simplest things seem to be the greatest challenge, whether it was buying a chair, buying a table, buying a filing cabinet, finding a pencil. It didn't matter. The things that you would reach into your desk drawer for, I'll just grab that out of my desk. Well, it's not there anymore. It's gone in the fire. So simple things became very hard tasks some days.
So that was one of the things that I knew that we were going to have to get to them right away, was some notebooks, writing material, things that they could carry on with their work.
Our initial focus, I guess, was just to get our feet under us, figure out what it was we had to do, and Jeff had things rolling incredibly. We had some paper, we had all of the office supplies that we needed. He had allocated space in that building for our team already. So some things were starting to move. Bell Canada was already on site. They happened to be in town at the time, so we were lucky there. He had our switchboard already rigged to ring out at the fire center.
We also talked about all the other things that had to be completed, dealing with staff and the projects that they had ongoing. And you could see that there were so many things that had to be done. Everybody was sort of a little overwhelmed as to what had to be done and how they were going to arrange it and who was going to do what. Someone during that time talked and mentioned the fact that would Incident Command System, ICS system, work in this situation. Having a lot of experience with it, dealing with it throughout my career, I immediately saw the benefits. And I spent a fair amount of time explaining how it works, what the positions are, and what each position does. And I think at that time everybody saw that this was the way to go, and the district manager, Graham Swanwick, stood up and immediately assigned names to each position.
We used the incident command structure to put some structure around what it was we had to do. All of our managers had different skill sets, so we tried to apply them to the important things that we had to do. For example, Cindy Moncrief, our sports services supervisor, she was applied to the Fin and Min section. She headed that section up. Trevor Park, one of the area supervisors, he headed up logistics around setting up our interim accommodations, both short-term and mid-term. Doug Gilmore, who's park superintendent, he agreed to head up the logistics section that dealt with salvage at the burned out building, and that was file recovery and all the kinds of things that went along with that. Dave Anderson, he agreed to be our information officer, and that was really important at the initial steps, dealing with the media, dealing with community inquiries, where can we get X service, so he was really helpful at the outset. Barb Larkin headed up our planning section. She was the IM supervisor at the time, and so she maintained all of the records and actually handled the IT setup, which was a huge piece to get us back up and running. Roy Sitters, he had a kind of a unique job. He was an area supervisor at the time. We applied him to operations, which was really everything else that needed to be done. For example, we still had bears running around town. We had a dam that needed to be manipulated. We had trout that needed to be stocked in the lake. So all of the staff that weren't assigned to the incident command structure actually reported to Roy. So he kept things moving, kept service delivery happening. He looked out 2-3 days at a time and tried to keep people occupied until we had a full structure where they could do their work. Of course, Jeff Gaudry was an important part of the team, and they provided huge amounts of support.
I knew that they were going to require telephones, computers, and I was thinking as to how we could quickly make this happen, and I just fell back on my training and what we do within the fire organization, and I thought, well, I will set up a mini incident command team of my own just to meet their needs.
So the morning after the fire, we met out at the fire center. Charlie Lauer, the regional director at the time, and Dave Jackson, the emergency management coordinator for the region, were on site. Andrew Cotter had arrived. He's the regional manager for the Ontario Realty Corporation. He arrived the day before. We all met out at the fire center with the fire chief, and he debriefed us and told us what went on, what we can expect inside the building. We still had some issues with some important things, some firearms. There were some chemicals in the building, still some personal items that needed to be recovered, so he agreed to do a sweep of the building as a result of that meeting.
We had a number of different things, purses, car keys, eyeglasses, and a number of different things that were quite critical to have for these folks.
Everyone in the community was wondering what's going on, and without any information, rumors were running rampant that we were shutting down, that we were going to leave the community.
There were rumors out there, and as the Chief Administrative Officer and Mayor and Council were receiving calls from our residents, and they were stating that they had heard on the street that now that the building has been burnt, that services would be leaving the area, going to larger centers like Kenora, Dryden, or Thunder Bay.
We went and met with the mayor and city councilors because already there were rumors that this fire was going to give M&R the excuse to leave town, and they needed to be reassured that M&R had lots of business to do in the Red Lake area, and that there was a future there for M&R in Red Lake, and just to assure City Council that we were there for the long run.
And we discussed what our options would be, and we did tell the M&R, the district manager, that we would help in any way possible, find them all the space they could, and after that day we went around looking at other available spaces where they could move into as fast as possible.
ORC's role in any emergency situation is for the preservation of the asset and to act as a resource to the lead ministry at the building.
We looked at a number of sites. ORC and ourselves, we went around to review these, talk to landlords, talk to the owners of this property, and we evaluated them, and at the end of the day we arrived on the site that we have used right here.
We looked at many short-term accommodation sites for all three ministries, but most of them came up short for various reasons, including lack of proper HVAC, lack of infrastructure, etc. It turned out that the only site that would meet any of our needs would be the Red Lake Heritage Center. Unfortunately, that was only large enough to house the Ministry of Northern Development and Mines. After careful review, it turned out that the Red Lake Forestry Point site, which is a government-owned site, would support the use of trailers to house the M&R staff.
Also, the morning after the fire, somebody came to me and said, geez, we have a coop call. You can imagine our heads were spinning. We were scrambling, trying to figure out what it was we had to do, but I didn't even know what a coop was at the time.
One of the first steps was the district getting in touch with the coop folks and making that connection.
We went on that call, and it was our emergency management specialist from Peterborough, plus a bunch of other people from the ministry, accommodations, LRC, the I&IT people, ORC was on the call. So initially I was a little skeptical. What can they do for us? We've got the issue right here in town. We need to deal with it. But over time it turned out to be an excellent way of connecting with the people that needed to help us to get things done, to assign the appropriate priority to things that needed to be done here, expedite some of the approvals processes that we really needed to get things happening. So, the initial call was quick, set some structure around it, and we agreed to do those calls on a daily basis. And we actually did them right throughout the summer until we were into our midterm accommodations that we're in right now.
Very beneficial in terms of the contacts up the line, making sure everyone was aware of what was going on and the things that needed to be done, and getting in contact with the right folks who might be with ORC or other parts of government, or the other ministries that also occupied the building, and making sure everyone was connected as we move forward here together.
One of the things we learned at our first COOP meeting were that there was a list of critical services that M&R needed to provide. First one was emergency management, emergency response. We had the capability right off the bat. We were in the fire center, all the staff were accounted for, and our team was in place. So we were ready to go right off the bat on that. We had, I believe, 7 days to manage the water levels. We had a dam that's the responsibility of M&R. We didn't think 7 days was appropriate. We were ready to go within 2 days because it was springtime and water levels were climbing. The public, one of the biggest issues was moose tag applications. They were inside the building, so we were starting to get calls about, geez, where are our applications and so on and so forth. So luckily we recovered those, got those moving. Some of the other districts helped us out with licensing, for example. Busy time, May is busy time, people ramping up at the tourist outfitters. So they needed licenses to provide to their guests. So some of the other districts stepped up and helped us with license supplies and got those to the people that needed them. So I think we overachieved in terms of what the minimum standards for service delivery are after an event like this.
It was interesting, the timing of when this fire happened with respect to our own LRC, business continuity planning. We had just went through a revision of ours, and it was timely that we just pulled out our recovery plan, which already identified the teams that we would need in the event of a disaster. And that's how we formed our continuity team from the IT perspective. So we had logistics covered off, we had PC support, we had server support, we had telecommunications, which are the key things that we would need to get back up in operation in Red Lake.
So Lands and Resources Cluster sent out Kevin Roberts, who was our savior, and he coordinated the acquisition, the setup of the hardware, the wiring. They laid the cabling. They had to set up each of these trailers. It was incredible the amount of work that they did in the short period of time. I can't speak highly enough of Kevin and his crew for their whole attitude, their accommodation of us, and getting things done in like record time.
It was all fairly new for everyone. I mean, first of all, having your office burned down is not something you deal with on a regular basis. And the coup process was also new for the ministry. So there was lots of learning for everyone.
One of the things that we learned was that communications was hugely important when you have an incident like this. Just at the very basic level, we needed to communicate with all of the staff. They needed to know what was going on, what our plans were for the future, what work they were going to do, where they were going to do it. So we started, even the day right after the incident, we had a full-blown staff meeting, everybody that could attend, and explain what the plan was for the interim accommodation, how long we expected to be out of the building, and so on. And we had those meetings probably, every 2 or 3 days initially. So that was hugely important.
As long as we kept our communication lines open, as long as the supervisors were always talking, we were able to overcome any problem that we were faced very, very quickly.
Once the building burned, we had a lot of requests from right across northwestern Ontario for information because this was quite an event and there was a lot of people interested in this particular fire, so I got a lot of calls from the general public and from other news agencies.
Having a lot of your stuff on a network, a lot of your systems certainly helps and makes your life a lot easier. You don't have your physical references immediately at your fingertips, but you have access to them.
The district staff were very diligent around doing what we call generic backup on the PC. And what that would do is would actually back up the PC to the server. We got lucky in this case because we could recover the server. We didn't lose any data as a result of the fire.
Triage, it was maybe a word we pulled off of the old MASH television show. We had a big tent, a big fire tent. It looked like an old MASH tent, and we had to make determinations as the sick and wounded files came in. We had to decide which we wanted to keep and which actually were beyond repair or we couldn't identify them, and which were just simply things that were saved. Approximately 60% of the files we recovered from, I'd say, the whole building were dry, and a lot of that was because they were in closed filing cabinets, and I think we found that was really important, that any cabinet that was closed had a pretty good chance of being dry. If some were wet, mold was actually, we could see mold starting to grow. From the time we were able to recover the first soggy documents from the upstairs portion of the building, we'd be looking at 5 days to 15 days, and you could see mold already beginning to grow. So it was important that the mold didn't take over the document and make it unusable for the future. So freezing it would halt the growth of the mold until it could be shipped to a facility that could take care of that.
We have changed a lot of the ways we do business in this building. We have a policy that there are certain papers that are very important, are placed in special containers. Now, for instance, our hiring documents, our personal records are all put in. We bought new containers to put them in, new filing drawers that would make them a little more safer to fire and to water.
File management we found was a very important thing to pay attention to. I think there are some very simple things that you can do to protect files from an event like that happening. Clean desk policy, just closing doors on file cabinets and so on, taking care of things at the end of the day and securing them, I think will go a long way to protecting some of our valuable information.
After hearing the stories and the lessons from Red Lake, I think about, where's my wallet? Where are my keys? What's on my desk? What should I put away? What should I take with me? Where is everybody? Is everyone safe? You take it a lot more seriously when that fire alarm goes off. It's a real wake-up call.
It also got me thinking about what would we do if this building, something happened to this building? Where would we move to? Because before you never, nothing could ever happen, but now we do know that something can happen and we need to start planning ahead.
I think the advice I'd give, I would have given it before and I'd give it again, is if you're well, it doesn't matter where you are, what are you going to do if your building burnt down overnight? You came to work and you don't have a building the next day. Where are you going to go?
Rehearse those business continuity plans. Make sure you have evacuation plans in place in your building, and those plans are practiced on a regular basis.
Well, I think the fact that Graham and others are out sharing the experience with others is the best thing they can do, because it is a great wake-up call for others that this could actually happen in your office, and you need to be ready.